Alina stepped out of the house into the chilly evening, pulling her coat tight around her shoulders. The air smelled faintly of rain and wet leaves, and the quiet street seemed almost empty. Inside, laughter and chatter mixed with her husband's tense voice echoing through the walls, but she had no patience for it anymore. She had tried to ignore the subtle distance growing between them, tried to smile at the little things, tried to convince herself that everything was fine, but tonight, it felt impossible. Tonight, she needed to escape. Even if just for a moment. She hadn't planned to leave so abruptly. But when she felt the tension rise inside her chest, she realized she couldn't stay any longer. Her husband's friend Daniel had noticed her frown as she lingered by the door. He was a quiet man, one of those people who didn't speak much but observed everything. He handed her the car keys with a small, understanding smile. "Want a ride?" he asked softly. His voice was calm, steady, almost grounding in contrast to the storm she felt inside. Alina hesitated for a second, surprised at his offer. A part of her felt uneasy accepting, but another part, the part that longed for a moment of peace, couldn't say no. The car was warm when she slid into the passenger seat. Daniel started the engine and pulled onto the road. The streetlights passed by in a rhythmic blur, painting streaks of gold and silver across her face. She stared out the window, her thoughts tumbling over one another. She thought about how long it had been since she had felt truly seen, truly understood, and realized with a pang that it had been months, maybe years. Her marriage had become a series of polite conversations, shared spaces, and quiet resentments that neither of them addressed. She felt invisible, even in her own life. And the weight of it pressed down harder than the chill outside. Daniel didn't speak at first. He didn't fill the silence with meaningless chatter or awkward jokes. Instead, he drove quietly, the hum of the engine and the soft whoosh of the tires on wet pavement filling the space. It was a silence that wasn't uncomfortably, it was almost comforting. Alina felt her chest loosen slightly, as if the quiet allowed her thoughts to settle, to breathe. She took a deep breath, letting the air fill her lungs, and for a moment she almost believed that everything could be okay, that maybe she could escape her sadness, even if only for a little while. Finally, Daniel spoke. His voice was low, gentle, careful. "You okay?" he asked, his eyes never leaving the road. The question was simple, but it struck her in a way she hadn't expected. No one had asked her that in a long time, not really, not with sincerity. Alina felt her throat tighten, and she hesitated, unsure if she wanted to answer. But she also felt a strange warmth, a flicker of hope that someone might actually care about how she was feeling. She didn't answer immediately, only nodded slightly. Letting the movements say what her words couldn't, Daniel glanced at her briefly, then returned his attention to the road. There was an understanding in his eyes, a quiet acknowledgement that she didn't need to explain herself. That small, unspoken gesture made Alina's heart ache and swell at the same time. It was rare to feel understood, rare to feel safe, rare to feel like someone noticed the cracks she had spent so long hiding. The car passed familiar streets. Yet tonight they looked different. The houses seemed warmer, the trees taller, the streetlights softer. It was as if the world itself had slowed down for this brief moment, giving her space to think, to feel, to breathe. Alina's mind wandered to memories she hadn't thought of in years, the laughter she had shared with her husband before the distance grew, the late-night conversations that felt endless, the small, intimate moments that now seemed lost. A wave of nostalgia hit her, sharp and bittersweet, and she pressed her hand against the window, tracing the blurred lights as if trying to reach back to something she had lost. Daniel noticed her gaze and didn't say anything. But he didn't need to. His silence was a kind of companionship, a quiet acknowledgement that sometimes words weren't necessary. Alina felt a strange mix of gratitude and guilt. She shouldn't be feeling anything for him. Hey, he was her husband's friend, someone who didn't belong in her emotional world. Yet there was something comforting in his presence, something grounding that she hadn't realized she was craving. As they drove on, the conversation shifted without words. Daniel started to talk about mundane things, the traffic, the changing weather, small observations about the city. His voice was calm even, but there was a warmth to it that drew Alina in. She listened, surprised at how easily she could focus on him, how naturally she could engage without the fear of judgment or criticism. It was a rare feeling, and it made her heart beat faster than it had in months. Alina realized she hadn't expected this ride to matter. She hadn't expected to feel anything at all. But now, with the soft glow of the streetlights on her face and Daniel's steady presence beside her, she felt something shift inside her. A part of her wanted to speak, to pour out her thoughts, her fears, her sadness, but another part held back, afraid of what it might mean. It was a delicate balance, a moment suspended in time, where the world outside the car seemed to fade and only the two of them existed. The streets grew quieter as they left the city behind, the hum of the engine the only sound accompanying them. Elena's mind wandered again, thinking about the choices she had made, the paths she hadn't taken, the moments she had ignored. She realized that she had spent so long trying to hold everything together that she had forgotten to take care of herself, to acknowledge her own feelings. And now, sitting here with Daniel, she felt a spark of clarity. Maybe it wasn't too late to feel again, to notice the small joys, to reclaim the part of herself that had been buried under routine and obligation. Daniel glanced at her briefly, as if sensing her thoughts, and gave a small, reassuring smile. It wasn't flirtatious, it wasn't inappropriate, it was simply kind, human understanding. And that was enough to make her heart flutter unexpectedly. Alina felt a mixture of emotions, relief, confusion, longing, gratitude, all tangled together in a way she couldn't untangle. She pressed her hand to her lap, grounding herself, trying to make sense of the swirl of feelings that had suddenly taken over as they approached her street. The city lights began to blur into softer glows. Alina realized she didn't want the ride to end, didn't want the moment to pass. There was a warmth she hadn't realized she missed, a sense of being seen, being understood, being heard. And though she knew the ride would end, though she knew she would have to return to the complexities of her life, she felt a small spark of hope. Maybe things didn't have to stay as they were. Maybe she could find her way back to herself, even in the midst of heartache and distance. When Daniel finally slowed the car and parked in front of her house, Alina felt a strange reluctance to leave. She turned to him, opening her mouth to say something, anything, but the words failed her. Instead, she simply smiled, a small, genuine smile that felt like a release. Daniel nodded, understanding that sometimes silence could speak louder than words. He waited for her to open the door, then gave a brief, polite farewell before driving away, leaving Alina standing in the soft glow of the streetlights, alone on the sidewalk. Alina felt the weight of the night settle over her. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill her lungs. The ride had been simple, uneventful in one sense, yet it had stirred something deep within her, something fragile, something hopeful. Something that reminded her that she was still alive, still capable of feeling, still capable of noticing the small, beautiful moments in life. Alina went inside, but the warmth of the car, the gentle presence of Daniel lingered in her mind. She realized that for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of possibility. Life was complicated, and her heart was fragile. But maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to navigate it, to reclaim her own sense of self, to feel again. And as she lay in bed that night, Elena's thoughts drifted back to the ride, the quiet streets, the soft hum of the engine, Daniel's understanding eyes. She realized that sometimes a single unexpected moment could change everything, could awaken emotions long forgotten, could remind someone of what it meant to be alive. And though she didn't know what the future held, she knew that she would carry that ride with her, that quiet, simple, beautiful ride that had reminded her of who she truly was. Days passed, but Alina couldn't stop thinking about that quiet ride. Every time she closed her eyes, she could see the soft glow of the streetlights, feel the warmth of the car, and remember the steady calm of Daniel beside her. It wasn't just nostalgia, it was a feeling she hadn't realized she was missing. Life at home had returned to its usual rhythm, but Alina felt different. She noticed the distance in her marriage even more sharply now, the polite words that failed to reach her heart, the empty routines that offered no comfort. It wasn't anger or resentment. Exactly, it was longing. A quiet, aching need to be understood, to feel connected again. She had seen Daniel twice since that ride-brief encounters at gatherings. Casual smiles exchanged across rooms, but each meeting carried weight. He spoke carefully, politely, never stepping over lines. Yet Alina found herself drawn to him in ways she couldn't name. He seemed to notice things she didn't say, to understand the emotions she hid behind polite conversation. That attention, small as it was, unsettled her. She felt guilty for enjoying it, for wanting it. Yet she couldn't deny that it brought life back into parts of her that had grown numb at a small dinner party hosted by mutual friends. Lena and Daniel found themselves seated near each other. The conversation started innocuously about work, mutual friends, the weather, but it quickly shifted to quieter, more personal topics. Daniel spoke of moments he had struggled with loneliness, of choices he had regretted, of hopes he kept. Private Alina listened, captivated. She had expected small talk, idle chatter, but this was something else. It was raw, honest, human. She felt herself opening in ways she hadn't allowed herself to in years. She laughed at small jokes she normally wouldn't have, nodded thoughtfully at his observations, and even offered her own reflections, surprised at how icily the words flowed. There was a subtle tension between them, a fragile thread that neither acknowledged outright but that vibrated in the air. It wasn't attraction in the conventional sense, not yet. It was connection, recognition. Alina realized she had forgotten how it felt to be fully present with someone who saw her, not her roles, not her obligations, not the life she had built, but her as herself. Every glance, every shared smile, every pause in conversation felt charged with an unspoken weight. She tried to suppress it, tried to remind herself that Daniel was her husband's friend, that boundaries existed for a reason. But emotions aren't always polite. And her heart refused to follow the rules she tried to impose. Later that night, walking home, Alina felt the quiet hum of the city beneath her feet, the cool breeze brushing against her cheeks. She replayed the dinner conversation in her mind, the moments of connection, the way Daniel's voice had settled around her like a calm wave. Her chest felt heavy, but not with sadness, rather with awareness, with longing, with the dizzying awareness of possibilities she hadn't allowed herself to imagine. She knew she had to navigate carefully, to guard her heart even as it awakened. She didn't want to act recklessly, but she couldn't deny the stirrings of emotion that had taken root at home. She avoided her husband's gaze, sensing that he would have noticed the change if she had dared to look directly at him. Their marriage had grown polite, efficient, almost transactional. And the contrast with her interactions with Daniel felt stark. It was painful to realize how small moments of empathy and attention could have such a profound impact. How fragile the human heart was when neglected. Alina lay awake, thinking of Daniel, of the ride, of the conversations, of the feeling of being seen. And she wondered if it was possible to reconcile her longing with the life she had built. A few days later, Alina received a message from Daniel. Nothing casual, nothing flirtatious, just a brief note thanking her for listening during their conversation at the party. He mentioned how rare it was to speak with someone who genuinely heard him, and how much he appreciated the honesty she had shared. Her heart skipped a beat. She felt warmth, recognition, and a confusing mix of excitement and fear. The message was innocent, simple, safe, but it carried weight. It reminded her that someone else truly saw her. Someone else could understand her without judgment. Someone else could hold a mirror to her own heart. She stared at the message for several minutes, unsure how to respond. Words felt insufficient. She typed, deleted, retyped until finally sending a simple reply. A thank you, sincere and neutral, but enough to acknowledge the connection. The conversation ended there, brief, polite, but the impact lingered. Alina realized that sometimes silence, distance, and careful restraint could intensify emotion more than any dramatic gesture. Daniel had not crossed any lines, and that was exactly what made everything feel more charged. The unspoken understanding, the unacknowledged feelings. The quiet caress all left her heart unsettled in a way she hadn't expected. Over the next week, Alina found herself noticing Daniel in ways she hadn't before. The way he moved, the way he listened, the subtle kindness in his gestures. Each observation felt like a spark, small but persistent, reminding her of the ride. Reminding her of the warmth. Reminding her that she had once felt alive in a way that routine had dulled. She struggled with guilt and self-reproach, trying to push these feelings away, but they refused to leave. The heart is stubborn in matters of longing, and Elena's heart had awakened in a way she couldn't ignore. One afternoon, Daniel invited her to accompany him to a local bookstore, a casual errand. Nothing extraordinary. She agreed hesitantly, feeling both excitement and apprehension. The trip was mundane on the surface, yet every step together carried a subtle electricity. They wandered through aisles of books, their hands brushing occasionally as they reached for the same titles. Their conversation drifted from favorite authors to life dreams, from childhood memories to reflections on the present. Alina felt herself laughing more freely than she had in months, feeling joy she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. She realized that sometimes connection is not loud or dramatic, it is quiet, gentle and yet unforgettable. As they left the bookstore, Daniel suggested grabbing coffee. Alina agreed, and they found a small cafe nearby. They sat across from each other, sipping warm drinks, sharing small anecdotes and deeper confessions. Alina felt her defenses lowering, her heart opening in subtle, frightening ways. She knew. This was a delicate line. They were friends. There were boundaries. There were reasons to maintain distance, but the pull of human connection is rarely obedient. She found herself wishing the afternoon would stretch on forever. Wishing that the world outside the cafe didn't exist. Wishing that she could simply remain in this bubble of understanding. Warmth and gentle attention. The conversation turned to more personal topics. Daniel shared regrets he had carried silently, mistakes he wished he could undo, moments he had missed. Alina listened with empathy, feeling the quiet resonance of their shared human fragility. She began to speak of her own disappointments, her own unspoken frustrations, her own longing for attention and understanding in her marriage. Daniel listened without judgment, without interruption, with patience and care. Alina felt herself unraveling slightly, allowing layers she had kept hidden to surface. She felt vulnerable, exposed yet strangely safe. The combination was intoxicating, confusing, and exhilarating all at once. Eventually, the afternoon waned and the sun dipped low in the sky. Alina knew she had to return home to her life, to her responsibilities, yet the reluctance was almost physical. She didn't want to leave the warmth of the cafe, the safety of Daniel's presence, the quiet intensity of connection. When they stepped outside, the evening air was crisp, but Alina felt no chill. Her heart was racing, her thoughts tangled, her emotions raw. She knew she had to tread carefully. Every glance, every word, every unspoken feeling had weight. She realized that even innocent connection could stir dormant desires, waken long-buried needs, and force her to confront truths she hadn't wanted to see. Walking back to her car, Alina felt a strange mixture of clarity and confusion. She understood, now more than ever, how much she had been craving recognition, understanding, warmth. She realized that it wasn't Daniel himself, it was the way he made her feel. The way he reminded her that human hearts need attention, need care, need acknowledgement. She felt gratitude, but also fear. She feared the emotions she could not control, feared the longing she could not extinguish, feared the vulnerability she had allowed herself to experience. When Daniel finally drove her home, the silence between them was comfortable yet heavy. Alina felt the weight of what had passed during the day, the unspoken acknowledgement of feelings that neither could fully express. She looked out the window, watching the familiar streets pass by in muted light, feeling the tension of her heart and mind. The ride was quiet, but it spoke volumes. Every glance Daniel offered, every subtle smile, every careful word carried meaning beyond their explicit conversation. Alina felt a gentle ache, a mixture of longing, awareness, and the quiet realization that her heart had been awakened in ways she hadn't expected. As she stepped out of the car, Lena hesitated, wanting to say something more to capture the fragile magic of the afternoon, but words failed her. She offered a small smile, genuine but restrained. And Daniel nodded in acknowledgement, understanding that sometimes moments don't need to be explained, they simply need. Alina woke up that morning with the weight of her thoughts heavier than usual. The days with Daniel had left her heart restless, yet awake in ways it hadn't been for months. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the floor, feeling the pull of emotions she had tried to suppress. She knew she could not ignore them anymore. Every conversation, every glance, every small shared smile had stirred something deep inside her. And the quiet realization that she was alive again made her chest ache in both joy and pain. The ride, the bookstore, the cafe, they were small moments, yet they had grown into something unignorable, something that demanded her attention. She decided she could no longer hide from the truth. Her marriage, once full of routine comfort, had become a series of polite gestures and empty conversations. She had convinced herself that life was fine, that stability mattered more than emotion, yet the past week had shown her otherwise. She needed honesty with herself and with those around her. She could no longer continue living in quiet resignation, pretending that her heart was content. She had to face the reality of her feelings, the reality of her marriage, and the reality of the fragile, beautiful human connection she had rediscovered. That evening, Alina asked her husband to sit with her in the living room. His brow furrowed slightly, sensing the seriousness in her tone. She began carefully explaining the emotions she had been carrying silently, the ways in which she had felt unseen, the longing she had tried to bury. Her voice shook occasionally, but she pressed on, determined to express the truths she had kept hidden for far too long. She did not mention Daniel specifically, not yet. She focused on herself, on her feelings, on the gaps that had formed in her marriage. Her husband listened, silent at first, then with growing understanding as she spoke. Alina noticed this subtle shift in the room. Her words were not accusations, they were confessions, reflections, and heartfelt truths. For the first time in months, her husband's eyes softened, and he began to speak with honesty he hadn't shown in a long time. They talked for hours, slowly, carefully, uncovering layers of misunderstanding, neglect, and unspoken sadness. It was painful sometimes, uncomfortable, but also liberating. Alina realized that confrontation did not always mean conflict. Sometimes it meant growth. Sometimes it meant opening doors that had long been closed. Days turned into weeks, and Alina continued to navigate her feelings and her marriage with newfound clarity. She realized that the emotions she had experienced with Daniel were not about betrayal, they were about being seen, being understood, being human. Daniel had not crossed boundaries. He had offered kindness, attention, and genuine care. Elena's heart had responded naturally, as human hearts do. But she also understood the importance of respect, loyalty, and self-awareness. She maintained distance, carefully, deliberately, honoring both her marriage and the quiet bond that had awakened something inside her. Alina noticed changes in herself as well. She no longer accepted quiet resignation as a permanent state. She began to express her emotions openly, to seek connection with her husband in ways she hadn't attempted before. The small gestures of understanding, shared moments of laughter, and honest conversations slowly rebuilt bridges she had feared were lost. It wasn't instant and it wasn't perfect, but it was real. She realized that love, at its core, required attention, care, and vulnerability. It required courage to face truths, even when they are uncomfortable. Meanwhile, Daniel respected the boundaries Alina had set. He continued to be polite, warm, and considerate, yet he stepped back, giving her the space to navigate her life and her choices. That restraint, more than anything, left a lasting impression on Alina. She understood that connection does not always demand action. Sometimes it simply exists as acknowledgement, presence, and understanding. Daniel had given her that gift, and in return, she had learned lessons about herself, her heart, and the importance of boundaries and respect. One afternoon, Alina found herself walking through a quiet park, reflecting on the weeks that had passed. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the paths. Children played in the distance, couples strolled hand in hand, and the city hummed gently beyond the trees. Alina felt a sense of calm she hadn't known for months. She realized that her heart had expanded, not just with longing or desire, but with awareness, empathy, and clarity. She could feel deeply again, but without being overwhelmed. She could recognize beauty and connection without losing herself. Her mind wandered briefly to Daniel, and she smiled softly. She understood now that what she felt for him was complex, a mixture of gratitude, admiration, and emotional resonance. It was not romantic in a conventional sense, not a threat to her life or her marriage, but a reminder of what it meant to be fully human. She carried no guilt in acknowledging this connection. Rather, she carried respect for both herself and Daniel. She realized that some people enter your life not to stay, but to awaken something dormant, to remind you of your own depth, and then to leave with grace. At home, Alina continued to cultivate honesty in her marriage. She and her husband discovered ways to reconnect, to listen, to share thoughts without judgment, to rebuild intimacy through understanding rather than mere routine. It was slow, deliberate, and sometimes challenging, but Alina felt a sense of empowerment she hadn't known in years. She had confronted her emotions, faced her vulnerabilities, and emerged with clarity. The journey was ongoing, yet she no longer felt lost or numb. She felt alive, capable of love, capable of reflection, capable of choosing her path with intention. Months later, Lena found herself walking past the familiar cafe where she and Daniel had shared that long afternoon conversation. She paused, memories flooding back the warmth of his presence, the ease of their connection, the simple honesty that had stirred her heart. She smiled quietly to herself. That moment was in the past now, a gentle, beautiful memory, a lesson, etched into her life. She understood that not every connection is meant to continue, but every connection leaves an imprint. She carried that imprint with grace, letting it guide her toward compassion, empathy, and self-awareness. Elena's life did not suddenly become perfect. There were still challenges, moments of doubt, and days when the old distance threatened to return. Yet she had learned to recognize these moments, to address them, and to act with intention. She had discovered that the human heart is resilient, capable of awakening, capable of healing, capable of love, even after long periods of neglect. And sometimes it takes an unexpected presence like Daniel to remind us of these truths. One evening, as Alina sat by her window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. The ride, the bookstore, the cafe, the conversations, they had changed her in ways she hadn't anticipated. She had been reminded of the importance of emotional honesty, of empathy, of connection. She had been reminded that life is fragile, that hearts are easily neglected, but that they are also capable of growth, of awakening, and of love. Alina picked up her journal, a habit she had recently resumed, and began writing. She wrote about the lessons she had learned, the emotions she had experienced, the clarity she had gained. She wrote about gratitude for human connection, for understanding, for kindness. She wrote about the strength it took to face her own heart, to navigate boundaries, and to reclaim her sense of self. As the pen moved across the pages, she felt a sense of peace settle over her, a quiet, steady understanding that life, though unpredictable, was full of moments that shape us, awaken us, and guide us toward growth. Weeks later, she met Daniel, one final time at a mutual friends gathering. Their interaction was brief, polite, warm. They exchanged smiles, a few words, and a sense of mutual respect. There was no tension, no awkwardness, only acknowledgement of the shared past, the lessons learned, and the unspoken understanding between them. Alina felt a gentle closure, a calm realization that some connections are meant to illuminate, not to linger indefinitely. She left the gathering with a lightness in her step, carrying the memory of Daniel not as a temptation or regret, but as a reminder of the beauty of human empathy and understanding. Elena's marriage continued to evolve, now with honesty at its foundation. She and her husband shared moments of laughter, conversations that mattered, and gestures of care that were no longer taken for granted. They learned to notice each other, to speak their truths, and to hold one another accountable with love. Alina realized that human hearts thrive on attention, on empathy, on recognition, and that neglect, even unintentional, can create chasms that are difficult to bridge. The experiences with Daniel had reminded her of these truths, and she was determined to nurture the emotional landscape of her own life with intention and care. One quiet evening, Alina stood on her balcony looking at the horizon as the sun dipped below the skyline. The city lights began to glow softly. The wind carried a gentle chill, and she felt a sense of completion, not in the sense of endings, but in the sense of understanding. She had faced her vulnerabilities, navigated complex emotions, honored boundaries, and rediscovered her capacity for connection. She realized that life does not offer easy answers, but it offers moments that test us, awaken us, and shape the people we become. Alina understood that what changed everything was not a single event, but a